Okay, people are coming in. Jamie, if you look at the bottom right of your screen, you should see a little icon with people on it. It'll
Mm-hmm.
say participants, and if you click that, you can see the names of the people that are here.
Gotcha.
Hello, Tomas. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Looks like we've got Nathan Moody here. Hello, sir.
Oh, Nathan, a fellow Sky Fellow.
Yep.
Excellent.
Hello, Linus. Yep, Nathan just said, hey, Jamie. If you click the little chat button, you can see the chat too. Unfortunately, you can't see participants and chat at the same time.
Excellent. Yeah, I see it now.
Nice. All right, we'll give people another minute or two, and then, it's a good question. I don't know how they were. Like I said, I never shipped. We were talking behind the scenes about, I don't know what they call it anymore. I think it's maybe called Project Acoustics now. I think it was originally called Project Titan, that Microsoft voxel-based impulse response thing. I saw a demo of that at GDC a while back, like 5 years ago now, and we were talking about that. I think the first console that I saw them doing that on was the Xbox One, maybe. And I don't know how high res the IRs were, and I don't really fully understand how it works, other than it was using, like I said, a pre-cooked reverb map and then looking it up on a lookup table of some sort. But
Yeah.
it was a neat idea.
Oh, definitely, definitely. The demo I heard, yeah, it was probably about that time. I think it was like Gears of War 5 or something that they were doing it for.
Yeah, that sounded right.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it definitely sounded good. I like the way it sounded. I was just kind of curious as to if they were doing like real time IRs, if they were, spending that much computational processing on that specific process, or if it was like some sort of a cheat, or like if they were using baked in stuff and maybe augmenting with a I don't know. There's so many techniques.
Yeah. Looking at this because I'm curious. They've got their documentation up here. It says Project Acoustics runs real audio ships with a bank of impulse responses that are loaded into Unreal Convolution reverbs. These impulse responses are loaded into Unreal submixes. Using the acoustic parameters of these convolution reverbs, the Project Acoustics Unreal Audio plugin will directly generate reverb from your sound source. Okay. Interesting. Anyone else getting a freezing screen with no audio? Nope. It appears to be working over here. All right. Well, we've given people a few minutes. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we can start asking or answering questions. So, hello. This is Office Hours again. I am Mark Kilborn. This is my friend Jamey Scott, who's joined me this evening. Like I said, I'm going to bring some more people in so that people can listen to other people talk about audio and not just me. Jamey has done a lot in games, has done a lot in film. I actually was about to say you got your start in games, but I'm not sure is that accurate? Did you get your start in games, or did you like start somewhere else and then move to games? I don't remember.
Yeah, no, my first like professional gig was it was actually multimedia back in the early 90s when that was a thing, CD-ROMs and that kind of thing. So my first gig was at a graphics place, but they got this contract to do multimedia presentations for McGraw-Hill school books. And so I was doing little sound effects and little music things for those, and that was really fun. But quickly decided that I wanted to work in games. So my first actual big production was a Gundam game for the Bondi Pippin, if you remember that. That was a
I do.
Doom.
Yeah, I do. That's
That was a,
cool.
a doomed project, unfortunately, but it was completed, and it did eventually find a home in Mac and PC CD-ROM world. So yeah, I started in games.
Cool. So you started in games, and then you've moved to film and television, and you've worked on. I don't know, little things that people probably haven't heard of, like the Super Mario Brothers movie, Raised by Wolves, the Total Recall reboot. Like, you've worked on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So you've got an interesting perspective in that you've worked in the game world, which is where I expect most of our viewers are going to be from, but you've also worked in film, and you've,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's all the same to me, man. Honestly, it's all just how you make people feel with through their ears. Uh,
yeah, for sure.
of course, how you get there, it lies in the details. But I mean, the concept of how sounds sound good is kind of the same deal.
Yeah, I'm curious. Harder to do you find it harder to design for interactive experiences or for linear experiences where you kind of know how things are going to play out? Or does the fact that it's linear make it harder because you put more into it because you have that stability, so to speak, in terms of what you're designing for?
Well, harder is kind of a relative term, because I did like start in games. What is kind of hard about games was sort of the norm for me. Just in terms of being able to manage resources and optimize things and make things work in scripted ways, and object emitters and that whole stuff. I mean, that was what I ground my teeth on. So in terms of like, it was harder for me to switch from games to film, I think, because there were so many established rules in film that I had no clue about. So it took me a while to learn, how to be an editor, and so difficulty is just sort of relative.
Yeah, I hear what you mean. All right. Well, if anybody in the chat has any questions, fire away. If not, I've got a few questions. Actually, just got another one via the form. So we'll start answering these. Let me see. Let me pick one here. Okay. Do you want to talk about job loss or being a parent and a sound person? Which one do you, or sorry, not hearing loss or being a parent and a sound person? I said that
Oh,
correctly.
hearing loss. Wow, going for the jugular.
Yeah.
Yeah, you choose, man. I'm down with whatever.
All right. So somebody asked and didn't identify themselves, which is fine, but they said, what is your and/or the general industry's experience with hearing loss? I know that the best course of action is prevention, but I would guess that still a lot of audio people struggle to various degrees with it. How widespread is it? Does hearing loss disqualify one from being a sound designer? Would you hire a sound designer with hearing aids, or would those always shine a negative light on them? I feel like this is a very big topic, but almost everything I see about it is prevention of hearing loss, never what happens after.
Mm, yeah. It is a thing. Obviously, prevention is a really big part of it. Like when I'm on stage and it's really loud, I tend to put in earplugs. I'm one of the more zealous people about protecting my ears, because I want to do this forever, and if I can't hear things, then I can't do it forever. But I know plenty of people, particularly mixers, who have real hearing issues. A lot of directors too, believe it or not. I worked with a lot of directors that are just like, turn it up, and I'm like, dude, it's already ripping my head off, you
Yeah.
know, that kind of stuff. So, oh, hello, my dog has just come in to say hi.
Excellent.
But I also, it's one of those things that's kind of not talked about. We kind of keep it a secret. Because it is such a pervasive issue for a lot of us, and if you make it known that you're kind of losing your hearing, it can lower your chances of continuing to work. I do have some friends that are concerned with their hearing, and it's like if they have to say, can you repeat yourself a lot, it's like they get very self-conscious, and to the point where I know people who are in the throes of considering retiring because of it. Um, I've been very fortunate. My ears are in pretty good shape, and I think a lot of it has to do with how vigilant I've been with protecting my ears, and also, if I'm pre-dubbing and stuff, I'm always like doing that sort of at a lower level, so I'm not listening to really loud stuff all day long. I'm actually, keeping it cool, and then I'll check my work. Like at the end of the day, I'll spend 15, 20, half an hour just listening at level and making sure that the decisions that I made throughout the day are right. And I've gotten pretty good at being able to manage that.
Yeah, I do a similar thing. We've got a calibrated level that we're supposed to work at for the game we're on, and I tend to keep it lower and just check it. Although I don't necessarily do it at the end of the day. I'm often turning it up and down throughout the day, but like I do my work, I get it in the build, turn it up, check and see how it's sitting, turn it back down. As far as, would I hire a sound designer with hearing aids? I think it would really be a case by case basis. I mean, I guess I first got to say, I don't know what the law is around that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So don't take my answer as anything official on behalf of my employer. Um, but I mean, I could see it being a liability for somebody trying to get in or trying to get a job. I would definitely, if it were me, I would definitely really make sure that my technical skills were sharp so that even if I don't have necessarily the best hearing, I could still be useful in other ways by scripting stuff, by working on systems, whatever. I actually went through a hearing loss scare a couple years ago. If it helps to talk about this stuff, mine was not permanent at all. But in 2021, I had something called eustachian tube dysfunction, and I lost basically all the high end in my left ear for a couple of months. And it, like I said, not permanent damage at all. It was some sort of eustachian tube issue, and my doctor was able to fix it, but scared the hell out of me. It really, really did, especially when it first happened. I heard this kind of loud pop, and suddenly it sounded like my left ear was underwater. And it was like that for about 3 months. My boss was exceptionally cool about it. He was like, just figure out how to do your job. I'll let you know if things start sounding weird. And try to get it figured out. And he was like, if this ends up being permanent, we'll figure out how to work with you. He was really, really cool about it. And then, like I said, it ended up going away, and I've got a clean bill of health on that front, but it was very scary. So I don't know. It's a scary subject. I think a lot of us don't talk about it for the same reason that you said, that we're, afraid of sign of weakness, or, looking maybe like somebody who can't do the job anymore. But I think we're also a little bit afraid of it. And I think it's reasonable. I mean, it's like if you were a visual artist and you lost your sight, like how would you work, right?
Yeah.
Oh, look, the
Yeah.
heckler's here. Sorry. Go ahead.
I had that thing, it would happen like every few years or something, where like I would wake up in the morning and yeah, like all of the high end would be gone in one of my ears. It would freak me out. Fortunately, it never lasted more than a day or two. But when that stuff happens, it's like, oh my God, my livelihood, such a jarring thing. I actually knew a guy, I still know a guy, he's a friend, who is completely deaf in one ear, and you'd never know it. He's had a really long career in game audio, and I only found out about it like a few years ago, but apparently he's been deaf in one ear for a long time.
I mean, worked for Brian Wilson. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to make a joke. Like, my understanding is was deaf in one ear too. And I mean, I think you can get the job done with one ear. Like, again, when I was in that state, I was kind of working with one ear, and nobody ever pointed at, like, my boss never pointed out anything about the quality of my work diminishing, or nobody I worked with ever said anything. So I think that's doable. I would be much more concerned about losing both or having serious damage to both. But
yeah, the funny thing is that you could probably fake it pretty well with like the tools that we have, in terms of our metering, and just like every insert has like a really cool graph of like what's actually going on. So I bet you could fake it for a while.
yeah. Nathan just commented in chat. He said hearing aid manufacturers also need to be held to higher standards. Most of their products are awful from a perception of sound perspective, and Gordon Hempton did some good work in this area a while back. I'll have to look that up. I'm curious to hear about that. I've
He
never
says,
used a hearing aid, but I'm kind of interested to know what they sound like as a user.
yeah,
Obviously, I don't want to have to use one permanently.
Beethoven had hearing loss, but Beethoven never had to manage RAM allocation for sound.
Fair.
Uh, um, so I mean, I always keep these like really handy, and a lot of the technology that Apple is progressing on is they're going towards hearing aid level technology in these things, and these things are so great. I use them religiously because it's got like an internal limiter in them, basically. If I'm sitting on stage and stuff is peaking up 100, these things like limit them, and the external microphones on them are so good that they're pretty transparent, and I can sit and have this be like a good protection mechanism without the typical muffling that happens with normal earplugs. So
Interesting. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah, and they have like little features like dialogue enhancement and stuff like that, so you can filter out room noise and focus on who you're talking to. And I have a feeling that the next iteration and the further development of these things are going to go in that area where you can become kind of a bionic listener.
It's cool. I'm excited to try them. I got my wife a pair of those for her birthday in January, and I believe I'm getting a pair for my birthday in April. So that's why I haven't bought some for myself yet. But I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear them.
Yeah.
All right, let's tackle the parenting question. So somebody said, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it is less normal for people working in games to have kids and more normal to have pets. As you know, kids demand time and love. I sometimes get a bit worried when I see all the time people without kids put into audio things. I am not able to spend more audio time than I do. Sorry, I'm not able to spend more audio time than what I do on my full-time sound designer job because I want to be there for my son. Sometimes I worry about not having kept up with all the new tech, doing redesigns for my reel, etc. If I should suddenly lose my job, can you comfort me? um, what do you think, Jamie? Can we comfort him?
Um, we can comfort him. Yeah. Life is one of those funny things. You do what you got to, and I've seen so many people working in sound that have managed it, and a lot have not managed it. I see more people in games having a difficult time managing it, and I think the bar in games is getting so high, and it's so difficult to achieve that it's just hours, putting in, and the complexity of everything is growing so fast, and it's just you need to hyper focus for long periods of time, and that is anti family just by its nature. That being said, I have two kids. Well, they're not kids anymore; they're adults. The 24-year-old and a 20-year-old. Um, and I've worked out ways to manage it. The primary thing that I did was I stopped working at a company. I stopped doing a job. You know, Fortunately, it coincided with my first job was at a game company called Presto Studios. That was from I want to say 1995 to about right around 2001. Um, and it was in a crazy job. It was like that kind of thing where I was like working 16, 18 hours a day, like every day, but because that's what it took. And it was a very like college frat kind of environment at the time, and we were all working those kinds of hours, and we loved what we did. We were making like science fiction video games, and they were like photorealistic, and it was like I could make it sound incredible. It was just like a really amazing time to be alive, in comparison to what was going on before that. So, but as soon as I had my first kid in 2000, it was like, it was clear that I needed to grow up and I needed to make some changes. And that company went under. So that was my chance to sort of go out on my own and try my luck as a freelancer. And that's what I did. So, having a home studio, being at home, even if I was working my butt off, that was the key to me being a successful parent, as well as a really an audio person that puts a lot of demands on himself or herself, him and
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
I can definitely relate with the working from home, having a home studio thing. I mean, I've stuck with companies for the most part. I've done little bouts of freelance work, but having a studio where I can work from home, even if it's go work by day at the game company and then come home, have dinner with the kids, put them to bed, go back to work that evening from a home studio. Even if it's as simple as like I'm going to sit down and make some assets that I can then take in the morning or email to myself. I've done things like that in the past. I have not always done well at this. I feel like I'm doing better at it now. When my oldest son was much younger, I was crunching a lot and I didn't get to see him a lot, and it really, really sucked. And it wasn't. I mean, this didn't happen to me, but I know of people I worked with in the Call of Duty days who missed the birth of kids because we were so damn busy. Like, which is no game is worth that. But yeah, I would say like these days, I feel like some companies are less hostile about that. I would certainly try to work from home wherever you can. If you can get a job that allows you to do that, or set up a freelance thing. The other thing I wanted to touch on was the person asking the question had said he worries about not keeping up with all the new tech, doing redesigns, etc. I think a key to doing this is to get really, really good at time management. Get really, really good at holding yourself accountable when you sit down at your desk to do work. Do not look at the internet. Do not look at other stuff. Sit down and do what it is you're intending to do. And I mean, I to this day set timers for myself. Like when I need to design sound for, I did an ability for a character this morning, and I set a 45-minute timer on. I do it on my little Apple Watch, and it's 45 minutes. I'm going to make the best thing I possibly can, and then when that's done, I'm going to walk away from it, and then I'll come back. But I do little sprints like that to kind of keep myself focused. And then as far as keeping up with tech, I would just try to get some of that through your social network, in terms of people that you work with. Um, find it on Discord, find it on wherever you find the audio people you like to relate with, but also don't feel compelled to keep up with everything. Like I don't know if you feel the same way, Jamie. Like, I mean, it's certainly important to keep up with what's going on, but I don't feel like I have to try every plugin or know every little thing anymore. And I feel like I spent a lot of years trying to do that. And now I feel like my time is much better spent just at my desk making stuff with what I've got and maybe upgrading periodically. But I don't know. He specifically mentioned keeping up with the new text. That's what made me think of that.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because our craft is very tech dependent.
Yeah.
And it's like if you're not sort of up on everything, you sort of fall behind. And it's different for games and films for sure. I find that I don't need to be right on the bleeding edge with films, like I was when I was working in games. In fact, a lot of the people that I work with are very much not on the bleeding edge. So I use their sessions, and use plugins. But I do like to continually grow, because I feel like that's it's exercising my brain, and it keeps me from getting Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Or, it keeps me from like my brain turning to mush. So I like to learn a new synth every year or so. I like to learn new plugins, and that we've been in a very stale time for plugins. I think for the past few years, not a lot of good ideas are coming our way. So it's more like rehashes of things. And but I feel like maybe with some of the new AI tools and things like that, we're going to start to see maybe another push of like some really cool creative tools that of course I'm gonna just be by my curious nature, I'm gonna keep up on. I'll buy them and maybe use them once, or they'll become a right hand tool. But
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah,
important. It's important to stay up on tech. Yeah.
it is. I agree. Just be smart about it. Set aside time for it, and find a way to balance it. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm just looking at chat. Does anybody have any questions for us? If not, we'll keep going through the submitted questions. But I just want to remind people you don't have to sit there and listen to us talk. You can ask us stuff. I just wish I could afford all the new tech. Yeah, no kidding. It's expensive. I spent way too much money in my life on plugins.
Oh, Matt says ideal situation is working at home. We homeschool too. My kids are right there.
Oh wow.
Um, we homeschooled our kids as well, and that was a choice. A lot of people come to that decision for a bunch of different reasons, but for us, it was a thing where our oldest son just wasn't gelling in preschool and first grade, and we decided that we could do a better job with him. And so we pulled him out of school and started homeschooling, and it worked really great. And fortunately, my wife, who was amazing, was able to, bear the brunt of a lot of that responsibility. And then my youngest son, he just sort of, he was really smart, really bright. And even though he was 3 years younger, he just sort of went along for the ride. So we got a twofer in that regard. And we did end up, homeschooling our kids throughout their schooling career. And I've got my 20-year-old is a college graduate from UCSB. My 24-year-old is well on his way to being a college grad as well. So it paid off. Having that sort of focused attention at home, and I feel like they got a better education because we took the reins on that than they would have in public school.
That's amazing. I like every time I'm working in the summer, working from home, and my kids are home. Granted, it's different because my wife's at work every day. She works at a doctor's office as a nurse, but I find it so hard to juggle them and do creative work. But it's amazing you were able to pull it off. I mean, I think it's great. It terrifies me. It's cool that it worked.
Yeah, well, I've got a success story on that, thankfully. I mean, it could have gone any which way. I mean, life throws so many curveballs at you. How you navigate them is a crapshoot. And fortunately, my wife is a lot smarter than me, and she was able to like make some really good choices in that regard. So, Alexander Ephraim brought up a really
Yeah.
important question. Was Kenny G's rise in fame when you realized maybe a life in jazz was not for you?
Well,
Kenny G. Oh man, he really knows how to push my buttons, doesn't he? I believe there's a Pat Metheny thesis on the value of Kenny G that answers that question perfectly for you. Google that one.
this is what you get for calling me out on Facebook. Yeah, we know. We know.
Yeah.
um, Here, so outside, this was actually probably a good one where we could reply to it from the film world and the game world perspective. Outside of big name job sites like LinkedIn, Indeed, Upwork, and Game Jobs, what are some places to look for entry level audio jobs? I'm actually curious for your answer on this one because I get asked this sometimes from students I talk with who want to get into film sound, and my answer is usually some form of I have no idea. Go ask a film sound person, but
Yeah.
I'm curious what it looks like in your world.
Well, I think, I mean, obviously, I can give you my perspective on how I did it. I think this changes, and the ever evolving internet makes things change so much more rapidly than it did when I was doing my thing. But to give you an idea of how I did it, um, I started my transition into film right around, I want to say, like 2003. Um, but I didn't actually get my first like really big studio film until 2011. So that gives you an idea of how long it took for me to do that transition. It was 8 years. Um, Fortunately, I was working for Epic at the time, and they kept me employed, as a contractor, but they kept me employed on those Gears of War games for that 8 year transition. So I wasn't as worried about money, and I was able to sort of take on these odd jobs. But more to your question, the way that I found jobs was there were several avenues. I would go on to Mandy.com, which was sort of a place that you could find work back then. Now the competition pool wasn't quite as intense as it is now back then, because there's a lot more sound designers in the world than there was back then. Like, I mean, it's like 10,000 fold difference. So every job that would get posted on a Mandy now, you'd be up against thousands of applicants. But back then it was hundreds, and I did have those Gears of War credits, so those things made me stand out a little bit. Like, oh, I've heard of something that this guy has worked on, so I would actually land like gigs based on that kind of stuff. The other way that I did it was I made friends with student filmmakers. Sometimes I would be out of school or whatever, and I would go visit the TCF departments or whatever they're called, and I would meet kids and do their films for free. They were usually short films, so they weren't huge um, time commitments, but I did a lot of that, and some of them would go on to do other things, and some of them would take me with them, others would not. It was kind of a crapshoot, but there was one specific person that I did a student film for. It was a full feature. I did it for free, um, but that guy came back to me and started referring me to his friends, and I can trace the entire lineage of that single guy to me landing my first studio feature. So sometimes you get lucky. It's just all about the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. From the game, from the game side, I I've answered this question a couple of times. Now, this is the one that comes up like every night we do this, and it's fine. It's a question a lot of people want to know, but or see some version of this. In terms of just sites, if that's specifically your question, you've covered the big ones. The other ones I'd add are soundlister.com. Um, soundeffect.com has a blog where they post game sound jobs. There's also a Facebook group called Audio Jobs that I think is run by the gentleman from a sound effect.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, but beyond that, there are not a lot of entry level audio jobs in general, and there really aren't many right now after all the layoffs we've been through. So honestly, I would say the entry level job is to convince somebody to take a risk on you for a mid level job at this point. Like, I've seen a couple go by in the last few months, but I think it really needs to be, I think you really need to take the approach of, I'm going to keep working on my portfolio, get somebody who can give me real feedback, get a working professional to give me feedback until you get good enough that somebody says, you know what, you're better than most of the mid-level applicants we have in terms of sound design skill. We'll teach you the rest. And I've seen people do that. It can certainly happen, but it requires a lot of effort. That's my best advice at the moment. I know that's not great advice, but the market is brutal, to say the least, right now. I'm hoping that'll improve over the next year, but
It's the same in film right now. I mean, we're recovering from these massive strikes, and we've got our own strike looming on the horizon. So, Yeah, it's a really tough time for film and TV as well as games.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody who was at Dice, which is like the big industry business conference that happened a couple weeks ago, and I guess survive until 25 is like the thing everybody was saying. Just try to survive and hold on to your job, which is, I'm
Yeah.
laughing, but it's also kind of scary. Um,
Uh,
Alex mentioned people getting entry level jobs through QA. I've seen some of that. It can be done. It can also be hard depending on the company. So if you're going to try to go that route, I would definitely try to get to know people that are in the audio department of whatever studio you're working for and try to meet them through whatever social channels you can, whether it's Twitter, Blue Sky. We've fragmented so far at this point. The reason I say that is because in some studios, QA is very integrated with developers, and in some studios, QA is kept very sequestered and separate from everybody else, and they're not supposed to talk to each other. And it's a really weird social thing. So I would try to, if you want to go that route, I would try to get in with a company where the QA team interacts a lot with development, especially if they do what they call embedded QA setups, where they have QA people dedicated to specific teams, whether they be discipline teams or whether they be little teams working on projects. Like the project I have that we're working on at work right now, we have QA teams assigned to like the sandbox team that are building all the global features of the game and the missions team that are building missions. So those folks get a lot more interaction with us than people would at other studios where the QA is just in a separate building or whatever, which happens a lot. But yeah, that's thoughts on that.
uh,
Um,
Damien has a
yep,
question. Oh God,
go for
I
it.
love Soundwich. I love that. Is that the name of your company, David? That's classic. So he's just saying, how do you go about being a freelance sound designer and finding paying project? Well, paying projects, that's kind of what we were just talking about. But in terms of being a freelancer, do you want to talk about that? I've got a lot of ideas about that. I mean, just because I've been doing it for so long, but I could go on for a while. So why don't you start with that?
I can talk a little. I've done it for a few brief stints in my career. I've mostly been in house. Um, it seems like reputation is really the big one. Like, build a good reputation, work on whatever you can, get to know as many people as you can. I always try to tell people, at least in games, make friends. Don't worry about making business connections. Just try to make friends. Because what'll happen is you build up a big group of friends, and A, your life is better because you have a lot of friends, but B, sometimes work will come through those channels, which is honestly, every time I've gone looking for freelance work, I've just started saying to friends like, hey, I need some freelance work, and things kind of show up. So that's how it's worked for me. I don't know that that's necessarily the best advice for somebody with less experience, but I think having a big network of people that are friends, people that you've been really kind to and helped out wherever you can, is worthwhile. And I do mean proactively help people. Like, I'm always trying to connect people that I think need to talk to each other or whatever. And it's not about getting the returns, it's about being helpful, but it seems like it comes back to you if you do it enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like it's like a really complicated stew of things that are required to be a successful freelancer. And I think a lot of it has to do with being really good, first of all, at not just one thing, but being really good at a lot of different things. I mean, you can't. I wasn't able to survive as just a sound designer, like somebody who makes sounds. I had to be good at implementation. I had to be good at mixing. I had to be good at keeping my computers running. I had to be good at the business side of things. I had to be good at talking with people. I had to be good at networking with people. So there was like just this huge cocktail of elements that I feel like were kind of critical to being able to just function as a freelancer. Um, in terms of how you land jobs, yeah, I mean, it's like have that reputation of being able to do the job, obviously, and do the job in a way that people are excited to work with you. But the biggest thing I think, and this is something that has evolved for me over the years, is being able to be with people in a way that is just kind of cool and chill, um, and not forcing your hand, and not, trying to be, I don't know, it's such a complicated topic. But for me, it took a while to be the confident kind of person that can be like that, because for so many years it was like, I have my kids I got to provide for, and I need to, like, get this work. And so my head was in that space of like, oh, I got to network, I got to, meet these people. And so, and that would come off, as I would interact with people. And I knew when I was turning people off of me. It was just like, I just couldn't help it. So I had to evolve, like, who I am and how I approach my business and people and relationships. And that's just something that you got to work at really hard. But eventually you do get it. You do become that person that you need to be. It's just, something that takes a while.
Yeah, the comment you made about being able to be with people in a way that makes them want to work with you, that resonates for me too. Like there's like an ability to hang with a creative team, kind of. I don't know how else to describe it, but like being
Yeah.
able to be in the room with people and talk about stuff and work with them on stuff. And I've met really talented people who can't do that, and I've met people who are maybe not the best who can do that, and it helps them out. Like it's a big thing. Like the job is not purely who can make the best sounds or who can get the job done the fastest. There's a lot to it, and it's definitely, I would say, more so in your world, working on films and working and having done as much freelance work as you have compared to me. But there's all this relationship stuff that's really, really important. Like I have to have a good relationship with the creative director I'm working for, with the other discipline heads. You have to have a good relationship with your directors and the other sound folks you're working with. It's soft
Yeah.
skills should not be underestimated, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's more important than your actual, like, craft, honestly. You know, I think, you know, being able to kick ass as a sound designer is really important, because at the end of the day, you have to get people really excited about what you're doing. But um, you got to get with those people too, and that's a really big part of it.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to jump to another question because I don't see any in chat. Let me see here. Let me pick one. You know what? We talked about this one for a minute, and my experiences on COD, your experiences on Gears of War. But somebody asked, how did they make teammates' weapons sound different in Call of Duty? Was it just attenuation and positioning, or was there some other way to make it so that you can differentiate between your weapon and a teammate's? You go first, because you and I were talking about this, and you said some things about some of the games you've worked on.
Right. Well, because I haven't really worked on a big game in a while, my concept on this is probably out of date, because I think things have become quite a bit more procedural than they were, back when I was, like, heavily immersed in games. But like what we did on Gears of War, which, we had UE3 at the time. We didn't even have UE4. We certainly didn't have the audio capabilities of UE5. So we were dealing with just basic wave playback, all the time. So the way that we did it, we didn't really have anything procedurally going for us in that regard. But the way that we did it was, we took, like, the base set of weapons that, I had created for, just like the Lancer and all those things. And then I would do, like, just, in Pro Tools, I would do like a low pass, or I would do like a high shelf and a high pass, and then I would, like, do like an echo, and the usual things that you do to put things in the distance. And then we would take that process set, and that would be the distance firing of enemy fire. And then, because of the natural way that it sounded when it was attenuated, it contrasted significantly from, the first person player perspective.
Yeah, in the COD world, my memory is we were doing a similar thing in the 360 PS3 era. Um, we had a lot more space to work with variations and things as time went on and procedural tech got better. But even so, like even with using distance filtering and other things at runtime, to me, they're doing a first person perspective or even a third person over the shoulder close perspective weapon versus a distant weapon is a different thing. Design wise, like you've got different design goals when you're doing the first person perspective weapon. You want it to feel the right amount of width relative to the rest of the first person weapons. You want the right amount of power. You don't necessarily want the weapons to sound the same when they're in third person, not just the distance modeling and other things, but from a gameplay perspective, it's helpful for them to sound different so that you can tell it's somebody else firing it. We even at times experimented with things like having randomized pitch locked to different pitch ranges for different enemies versus allies to try to help differentiate things in the battlefield. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I approach back then, and I still to this day, when I work on guns, I approach them as two separate but related sets of assets. And I'll try to make sure that if I'm doing a first person AK-47 and a distant third person, or even a close third person AK-47, I'll try to make sure there are elements that are similar and maybe even draw from the same content sources for some of the layers, but I try to do enough different to definitely make them sound different because it's useful from a gameplay perspective to have them sound different. I am not a big fan of in-game reverbs at this point, so I feel like we've gotten to a point where doing EQ over, modulating EQ curves with RTPCs over distance has gotten a lot better. I still don't love in-game reverbs, so I tend to use impulse response verbs, or sometimes I'll bake it depending on what it is. Like for further distance stuff where you're really feeling like if it's a sniper rifle way off in the distance, I would almost always bake that than try to rely on an in-game reverb for that. The closer it gets, the more I'm going to start leaning on like in-game delay and reverb. But I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Like I feel like I'm just doing a more advanced version of what you were doing back then, just because the tech lets us do it. But it's kind of the same approach.
Well, COD is like, it's. I've always thought that those were far more interesting challenges because of the requirement to be so accurate to, specific guns that people know and are used to hearing. You had a much more rigorous peanut gallery than I did because, the stuff that I did in Gears was all very stylized. There was no, obviously there's no guns like that in real life. So I had a lot of liberty to just sort of just smash together a bunch of different guns and make it like just sort of like this stylized sound of something else. But that's fascinating to me, and I, as somebody who just loves the understanding and learning about the how sound is recorded and stuff like that. I always wanted to do work in games, even though I'm a total pacifist. I hate guns. I love the sound of guns, and I loved, I always wanted to do like specific recording sessions. I did one big recording session, it was like a big budget thing that I produced, but I didn't finish the game that I recorded them for, so that was a little anticlimactic, but to me, that's a whole exploration that I never got to do, but maybe someday I will. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that we had a more rigorous peanut gallery. I think is how you put it. We did, but their opinions weren't necessarily rooted in reality either.
Okay.
I would go read YouTube comments and Reddit comments and things where people were discussing the gun sounds of not just every iteration of COD, but other games. And you would occasionally have the person who chime in and be like, well, my uncle has this gun or my brother has this gun and blah, blah, blah. Most of the time, though, people were referring to YouTube videos. There is a whole culture of YouTubers that fire guns and record themselves shooting guns and showing how to disassemble them and do all this stuff. And it's not a thing I'm into, but I've watched enough of them now for work that I'm probably on a watch list of some sort. But it's funny because a lot of the people that were compare what they were hearing in the Call of Duty games for weapons, a lot of the fans would be comparing them to what they're hearing from YouTubers who are recording gunfire with their freaking phones, like clipping the hell out of their iPhone or Android phone mic, and that's not really what it sounds like either. So you'd be trying to hit this weird target of like have some elements that are somewhat true to the real gun, but also like I would be pulling up videos of some of these people. Like God, I can't remember the names right now. There was this Russian guy that had a channel. I would even be pulling them in as reference and comparing to try to make sure I got a little bit of various elements to make it sound kind of cool, and give them something that they were kind of expecting, right? Damien just noticed my "make it louder" sign. I started doing this a few weeks ago. I change it every week for work. I'm not doing it for this, but like it said, works on my machine and won't impact audio. I put little snarky comments that I get from on audio people at work. But yeah, guns are a weird thing. I've spent too much time on them. I would probably be happy if I never did them again, but it's a very deep rabbit hole.
I like stylizing guns. I honestly,
Yeah.
I enjoy that work. But in terms of like, doing a big game like a war game, that would tax me. I think I would get tired of that quickly.
Yeah. So Linus asked a question in the chat that he also submitted, which I had up over here because I was going to try to answer it. Do we have any recommendations for how to find communities and or conventions to reach out to people when living in a small town? I've got thoughts on the game side, but what do you think? What are your thoughts? We're all kind of intermingled these days anyway, but
yeah, the work from home thing, remote contractors thing has opened up a lot of doors. I think in the film world, it's not quite as relevant because we're still in a very tight community, and it's all relationship based. And so if you're not in, one of the main hubs like Hollywood, you're going to be hard pressed to make those kinds of relationships from the internet. It can be done, but I don't, there's not a lot of people that I interact with that are like not in LA or not in Skywalker Range or whatever these days.
Yeah, I feel like the game side of it's different. We're all over the internet. Like I used to say Twitter was the hub of it until things started melting down over there. And now we've kind of splintered out to various Slacks and Discords and other social media networks. There's still a lot of people on Twitter, but
yeah, it also depends on the job too. Like, I do know some sound designers, like in remote areas that, they're a lot easier to do that. But in terms of like an editor, like being working on a stage or a mixer or, somebody like that, it's like you kind of got to be close to the work because you're going there every day,
Yeah. So Linus, are you thinking just film and TV or are you thinking games too? If games, I can offer a couple of specific suggestions to you. But while we wait for an answer, we've got a question in the chat about post.
Working on an 18-minute short, lobs aren't placed well, and the boom is wildly different shot to shot. Oh boy, yeah. Should I just clean it up and then add room tone, clean air back in? To add to it, there's rain machines in constant use as well. There's some dependencies on this one, and the big one is what your mixer is expecting. Some mixers like, clean up audios, others don't. But in terms of balancing boom and lobs, that's a push and pull kind of thing that you just got to work at. Auto align post is a critical for that one. Definitely have that in your arsenal. In terms of them not being placed well, a lot of times if you what I do and what a lot of dialogue editors do is they'll edit lav and boom together so that if there's weaknesses in one or the other, you can kind of lean on the other to sort of do what you can. there's a lot of detail in this that we could go down a deep rabbit hole in. But the general rule of thumb is just use both perspectives, cut it as well as you possibly can, and then whether it's good enough, you have to whether you're going to do ADR or not. That's if it's indie, you can make that call as you're going. If it's a studio thing, that's a decision for your supervisor or whatever. But and sometimes if you can spend the time getting out some of that rain machine stuff, there's some really powerful tools out now. Clarity, Revoice Pro, and I mean not Revoice, D-Reverb Pro. These things are really powerful. Just make sure that you do a copy, move everything down and have your safety before you process. So that way, when you're on the stage or whatever, if they're gonna, roll it back, it's easily accessible. So.
Cool. I just responded to Linus in chat. He clarified game audio. I'll reach out to him tomorrow with a couple more options.
Ooh.
Let's see if we've got one more to answer here. All right, let's try this one. You'll probably have some thoughts on this, even if you're not working with Wise Reverb every day. So Nicolaj, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, asked, you've made it clear you don't like using in-game algorithmic reverbs, but sometimes we are forced to for performance reasons. I often feel lost when I have to dial in reverbs for specific rooms. I understand how most parameters on reverbs work, like diffusion, length, filtering, etc., but often have trouble translating that to a specific room. Do you have any tricks about how to translate rooms to reverb settings, maybe based on dimensions, shape, materials, etc., or do you know any resources that can make me better at this?
I think less is more when it comes to reverbs. I mean, I know that, sometimes it's like, particularly on dialogue, it's like we're used to hearing a certain amount of reverbs just from, recorded sound. And maybe it's not even reverb. Maybe it's just, tight earlier reflections in dialogue. But I'm always amazed that, like, when I take away the effects and music and stuff, how reverby some, like movie dialogue is actually. But I think here's the way that I got good at reverb was I spent a lot of time matching reverbs from production to ADR. Just years and years and years of it. Listening to the quality of the reverb that was naturally in the production sound, and doing my best to match the ADR for that. Now there's things now where it's just like it just does it for you automatically, and it's your choice to sort of utilize those tools. But for me, there was a great benefit in evolving my ear to actually doing the work and learning that whole thing. And it took a long time.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, you could simulate that in Wise with their reverb by recording yourself speaking in several different spaces and then recording yourself in a very dry space and treating your dry recording of your own voice as ADR, and then sit in there in Wise and start tuning the reverb in Wise to try to match some of the other spaces you recorded yourself in to see if you can get closer. That might help you start to figure out which parameters to push and pull to dial things in. Hell, maybe that would make me better at getting good results out of the Wise reverb. Maybe it's me, maybe it's not them. But yeah, that was the first thought I had while you were saying that. Like, maybe you could fake that as just an experiment. And I mean, I think it might be worth doing. I will say that I felt like I got pretty good reverb in the last couple of years. I know I talked to you about this at the time, that somebody gave me some advice on how to get better. And one of the things I did after I got that advice was just sit there and spend a hell of a long time with a single reverb plugin and read the manual cover to cover and play with every single setting and just try to dial in different spaces.
Yeah, I think as audio professionals, we owe it to ourselves to do that work, because
Yeah.
it's an important one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it is 9 o'clock. I don't see any other questions in chat. So I guess at this point we'll wrap it up. I have a few questions we didn't get to, but I will either save them for next time or I'll do another little addendum video to get around to them. But thank you all for coming. And Jamey, thank you so much for coming along. I hope you had fun. We kind of like pelted you with random questions. I think I
love
warned you
it.
that it was
No,
super informal.
it's really cool. I appreciate the opportunity to just shoot the shit in sort of a semi-public way. It's really fun.
Yeah. Well, if you ever want to come back, I'm going to keep doing this until people get sick of it. So you're always welcome back.
Yeah, love to.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Well, have a great week, everybody. I'll be back in about 2 weeks, and I'm going to bring somebody else next time. Maybe Alex Ephraim, if he wants to join. We'll see. But
I'm going to chime in for that. That'll be great.
Yeah, it'll be fun. All right. See y'all around. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.